Helping Seniors Television, all about improving quality of life for seniors. If you're a senior, know a senior, or plan to be a senior, then this show is for you. It's all about helping you develop your own aging plan so you can age actively and with dignity. Helping Seniors Television from the Helping Seniors Network of information, education, and resources.
Learn the 2 most important questions about assisted living with Greg Kennedy of Zon Beachside on this edition of Helping Seniors TV.
I'm Kerry Fink with Helping Seniors of Brevard, and welcome to Helping Seniors Television. On behalf of Joe Steckler, our president and founder, it's a privilege to have you with us today, and I hope you're going to enjoy the information we're going to share and that it will be valuable to you. And we're very fortunate to have with us in here today none other than Greg Kennedy, who is the executive director for Zon Beachside Assisted Living and Memory Care. Hey, Greg, how are you?
Doing well. How are you?
And you know, we were talking about that Zon Beachside has a long history of supporting the work of helping seniors, and we were talking about, I remember when you and our president Joe Steckler were doing TV before you'd actually done groundbreaking for this facility, and that you had really put Zon out as a place that was really and has certainly proven to be cutting edge in terms of moving things forward for not only assisted living but memory care. But we were talking today and said, well, what would we want to share that's new and helpful to seniors today? And I love this topic. It's 2 questions that you need to answer about assisted living. And this comes from your experience of talking to families when they're trying to figure out what's the next move for mom or dad or aunt or uncle or that relative that they realize maybe it's getting to be a little too much for them to maintain at home. You know, this is actually, we were talking about this today, we're in 12 years of operation of Helping Seniors of Brevard now. And I can tell you that when we get calls in on that senior information helpline, it's that free call here in Brevard County, 321-473-7770. When people call in, they're calling in with all sorts of needs, all sorts of issues, all sorts of things. It can be everything from housing to transportation. But how do we know when it's time? Because we get a lot of calls from the adult children of parents who are in Florida, and then they'll say, well, I was down visiting mom or dad and I'm getting a little nervous if they're able to actually manage everything their own. This must be your life almost every day, Greg.
Absolutely. Every single person that comes through the door is the exact same issue.
Well, how do you sit down and help guide them through all these questions? Like, you know, you said there's 2 questions you need to answer, and it sounds like that's almost the thing that you almost end up universally talking to families about.
Yeah, what I've found over the years is, in talking with probably thousands of families, is they come in overwhelmed because they are, unfortunately, many times aren't planning ahead. So it's unfortunately either a crisis or getting to be a crisis situation, and that's a difficult time to make a decision. And so the first thing I always try to convince families to do, or the individual themselves, is plan ahead. And I think, you know, so many times I've told individuals this, is you plan your entire life. We plan every day. We plan our work lives and what we do. And for some reason, and there's a psychology there, they don't like to plan where they may reside in an assisted living facility. It's just not something people, you know, typically plan ahead. And so unfortunately, it is typically a life change, hospitalization, a fall at home, and all of a sudden that panic sets in of, now what do I do? And when you don't plan, then it's left up to unfortunately, the adult children many times to make those decisions.
Yeah.
And they're big decisions. They're moving someone out of their home after living there for 50 years. Financially, it's a large commitment. So it's, anytime they can plan ahead is far better. And so that's the first recommendation. And you don't have to ever make a decision, but be educated. And so the sooner they can do that, the better.
You know, I wanted to comment on that because our president and founder, Joe Steckler, this has been a kind of a drumbeat for him ever since, not only in the helping seniors world, but Joe's the guy that really got Brevard Alzheimer's started. They call them Joe's Clubs to this day, the adult daycare centers. But he's always talked about everybody needs an aging plan. And we've adopted at Helping Seniors, we're the Florida nonprofit that for 12 years has operated the county's senior information helpline. And we talk about this a lot, that we need to help people. We call it getting their ducks in a row, but what we mean by that is just what you're talking about. It's helping people plan ahead. Because so often, things will happen that we run into, but if we just were thinking about it, because normally picking a place to live is kind of a joyful occasion, right? We dream about, we want to live in this kind of this is how we want our bedroom to be, this is how we want our kitchen to be, and all those kind of questions. But then it seems like all too often it's a life change that causes a crisis that then you're talking to families about.
And unfortunately, at that moment, they're not dealing with just that decision. It's their mother's in the hospital, they live on the other side of the country, and so they're flying into an area that they don't know. And so they're trying to figure out, where does my mother want to live? Where would she like to live? She can't tour because she's in the hospital, so I'm making this decision. And that's difficult. And it's sometimes maybe isn't fair to the children because it's very stressful. And so the more you can plan ahead, the better. And it doesn't, not just assisted living, it's everything from what am I going to do in my home?
Yeah.
If I need a care, who's that home health agency? Who's that care provider in the home? Not just, it's like you said, it's that aging plan of every step along, here's what I want.
Yeah.
So the family knows.
And that was actually a question I was going to ask you about. Do you think a lot of it could be, we push off the decision. We talk about, our whole life they ask us about plans, right? Your kid, what do you plan to be when you grow up? And then when you're an adult, well, what do you plan to do? Are you going to send your kids to college? Are you planning where you're going to, how you're going to work your career? And then we get older, they talk to us about a retirement plan. But usually that's just strictly like financial, Where's your property? Where's your stocks and bonds? Where's your 401k? They ask us questions like that. But what Joe talks about with the aging plan, and it's so important because you're hitting I think so many of us carry maybe stereotypes. We may have been kids and we went to see great grandmother at a nursing facility, and we just don't carry a positive remembrance of that. And yet what you do with assisted living, here we are in today's world, it's a whole different kind of thing. You've really worked to establish that and really kind of take it to another level. You've integrated technology. There's a lot of things that you guys do here at Zon Beachside. How much of that, how do you express that, or how do you explain that when families come to you and you're trying to get them to make good decisions for their loved ones?
What I've found over the years is it really comes down to two things, because, and I think you touched on this as we started, because I think when they walk through the door, where do I even start? What questions do I even ask? Right. I've heard that from so many families that I sit down with them and start talking about their mother, and they're like, I don't even know what to even ask at this point. Right. And there's 1,000 questions you could ask. Right. And so I always tell families there's really two decisions you have to make today. You have to choose the right place and you have to choose the right time. And then families kind of step back and, yeah, I guess that is true. It's kind of breaking down to two simple questions. Yeah. And so I always tell them, at this point, choose what's the right time. Mm-hmm. If that means my mother's in the hospital and she can't go home, obviously that question's kind of answered for you. The more challenging one is my mother's at home, she's kind of doing okay. I think at some point in the future she may need some assistance. I don't know what that looks like. That's a little more difficult to answer, but you can still walk through that and get to that point and say, okay, if this happens, I think maybe then we'll do this. And so that's the right time. And then the right place is obviously kind of what we're talking about is what are the things to kind of decide ultimately, and then that is the place that I'm choosing. And that's where the more, soon you can do that, the better. If you can involve your parents, mother, brother, sister in that decision, great. And then when I'm starting to talk about place, I always tell families there's 4 things you got to make a decision on. I always tell them, consider it a square. Okay. And there's 4 quadrants, and it's services, products, price, and location. Those are the 4 reasons people choose an assisted living. Within those 4 buckets, are the things that are important, and there's no right or wrong answer, but within those 4 buckets, services and products, price and location, are the things that are important to you. Some people are really concerned about services. What is my mother going to get? Is there a nurse on staff? What's the nurse-aide ratio? And some people are more concerned about price. It's a very valid concern, and I can only get in this price kind of range. Location, I want to be 2 miles away from my daughter, and so here's the radius of where I'm willing to go. So those 4 buckets are really what you come down to, and I always tell families, sit down and think about those 4 things, talk with your mother, and see what is important to her in those 4 buckets. And then it's amazing, families come back and say, well, I didn't even think about this.
Right.
I put the radius and I put the price, and then my mom really wanted this, bingo 3 times a week. I put that in the product.
Yeah.
And it narrowed it down to, now when I go in the building, I can say, well, these 5 things within this grid are my decision points, and now tell me everything out. Can you do these? And then outside of that, what else should I consider?
That makes so much sense what you're explaining, because I think for, particularly when we do the Helping Seniors TV, I always like to start at sort of a 30,000 foot level, because I think so many of us don't understand like a lot of the nuances. Like we just lump, and this doesn't really sound good, but I think for most of us, we're out there and we just lump it into the quote old folks home, and we have no concept of the variations and the things that we don't even know the right questions to ask Greg so often. So when you sit down with a family and say, I guess the first 2 questions are, what is the right time and what is the right place? And then the question becomes about the right place. You offer up, say, well, think about these four areas. As you walk families through what assisted living is today, and particularly you guys are also leaders in memory care, which I guess becomes more and more of concern to more and more families as we go along. How do you share with them the advances that this is just not your grandmother's or great grandmother's kind of facility? It's a very pleasant experience, actually.
Yeah, there's so many, and it's a drastically changing environment too. So many times families do exactly that. They come through the door with the expectation that 20 years ago I went to see my grandma, and here's what I remember and here's what I expect. And then the more you talk with them about it is, the dining experience is a true restaurant style experience with a full menu and everything from steaks to salmon on the menu. I mean, that's not what they expect. And then services and products. So it's really starting at the basics, determining within those 4 areas what's important, and then within that, if let's say their location isn't as important, well then you've got a bigger radius of 15 miles or 20 miles, and now let's look at the services, because it's really important. My mom has maybe fallen a lot over the years, and so I really need a place that has the right services. Maybe that's technology on fall detection, and some of the things we do here with not just fall detection, but also then trying to prevent the fall is identifying triggers that cause a fall so we can be ahead of that curve and hopefully prevent the fall. So it's things like that that are important. And then as you touched on, then going into memory care of looking at services and products. Obviously memory care is exactly that, services and products of how to better deliver that. And there's some really neat technology that we're happy to talk about that we've introduced recently on memory care that's very exciting.
Well, I was going to ask you that because I notice if I go to your website, zonbeachside.com, you call it, and I thought it's an interesting dynamic, you call it assisted luxury living. And I think that's the first thing that people realize as soon as they hit your front door is it's bright, it's sunny, it's meticulously spotless, it's warm, it's inviting, but that's by design, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's looking at those things that are important for people, which is the dining experience is important, cleanliness. I want my mother to be taken care of, so I want that staffing attention, whether it be a nurse or CNA. It's looking at all those things now, and now it's, like you said, it's starting high and going lower, and now you're getting into the details of how do I get there? Now I know I want this for my mom. I know I want her kept safe. Now let's talk about what are those things, a nurse. I want the right aid ratio. I want the technology to keep my mom safe.
How do you advise somebody when they're just beginning that thought, like, wow, you know, I could see where maybe the next 6 months or maybe within a year, you know, because like I said, we get calls all the time from parents, from the children of parents who they're out of state, and then they're like, well, we visit mom at Thanksgiving and it's looking like it's more difficult, so something is going to end up having to change here. How do you tell families, here's a good way to start to research that? You know, you're trying to get, because I've heard a statistic, you can tell me if it's correct, there's something like 140 plus assisted livings here in Brevard County, is that right?
Yeah, somewhere in that range.
Wow. How does a person know where to begin?
You know, it's like shopping for a car. I don't think anyone goes out and buys a car without at least setting foot in the car.
Right.
And so I'd encourage the same thing, and not just one car. Go to lots of, you know, I look at 10 cars, and same with assisted living. And we're that meticulous when we buy a car, which in the grand scheme of things from a financial decision is much less than assisted living. And so for an assisted living, you should even look at it in even more detail. And so shop, again, before your car breaks down, shop before you need assisted living tomorrow. And so the sooner you can do that, the better. So the first thing is going out there and just exploring. The more you educate yourself, if you go to 5 assisted livings, all of a sudden, wow, I didn't even think about that, and I didn't know there was this full range. And I think the other thing to keep in mind is for every person, and again, I tell this families all the time, is there's a lot of different assisted living, so find out what's right for your mom. As you mentioned, there's 100 and some assisted livings in Brevard. That's because there's a 6-bed home-like setting that might be perfect for the right individual. My mother really wants to be in a home, and there's benefits and drawbacks to that, as well as larger like Zon Beachside, and plenty in between. And so you kind of figure out by going and talking and seeing, and all of a sudden you say, yeah, I could see my mom here, I could see her in here, I want these. You know, we can do things on a larger scale because we obviously have more residents and more staff. And then on the flip side, you know, do I want to be in a small home because my mom likes the feeling of being in a house? And so understanding that and finding where she's going to be comfortable.
Well, you guys, I want to shift the focus a little bit over to the memory care side of it, because that's a challenge that many families are facing more and more frequently. But I remember you talking, and it sounds like you guys have even taken it to another level, about how you use technology throughout Zon Beachside and in the memory care and all of that to do the best that you can to make sure residents are really being looked after. And you even have talked in the past about how some of the technology helps figure out in advance when something may be changing that might need to be looked in on for a resident.
Yeah, so we were one of the first in the country to actually, back, you know, as you mentioned earlier, when we were first having these conversations years back, we were one of the first in the country to roll out fall detection. It was very early, it was new technology, and we've been working through that for the past now 5-6 years, and I think I've really refined that, worked with these companies as they've developed their product, and you know, it's been interesting to watch that growth of that technology. So I think that's a key piece, because I've always been a believer in fall detection is good, fall prevention is the goal. And so I've always been pushing these companies of, let's use the technology of fall detection, and now what can we do to prevent that fall? And there's amazing things that you can learn leading up to a fall in a resident. And so that's where this technology has started to get to. And so we're excited now to finally get to that point where we feel the fall prevention is really reality. Not 100%, we'll never obviously get there, but even if we can prevent some falls, that's obviously far better. So.
Yeah. You know, I wanted to bring this topic up because I think, do a lot of times that the adult kids feel maybe a little bit guilty, well, like mom would rather be at home. I don't know how I feel about moving her into an assisted living. And I want to, before I even ask you to respond to that, I want to use the example that I've seen people who, seniors who sit at home and they sit all day just watching TV, or maybe even just honestly, maybe just blankly staring at the TV. They're not getting good nutrition. So everything seems like it's on a downhill decline, because even though, quote, mom is happiest at home, then something happens and then they have to move into a facility like Zon, where they're getting proper nutrition, they're getting proper medicines on time, or whatever is going on with that. They're getting proper supervision for the things, and they're getting socialization. That, and I've seen it. I have literally witnessed somebody that was in the former who then moved into Zon, and it just changed the whole trajectory of their life. It really seemed to, I would say, add years to their life. But do you see that happen a lot as you talk to families and say, no, the relative really, they really want to stay at home, so but now we're stuck?
Yeah, lots of times it's walking through that, because each one is so unique. There isn't a, if you want to call it a playbook out there to say, here's how it best works. There's a lot of strategies, and the team at Zon Beachside is, in my opinion, phenomenal at working through that. Right. Because it's figuring out what are those barriers, what is the resistance. Like you said, they want to stay in their home, and that's everyone's goal, but there's these other issues that are happening. And so again, it goes back to that right time of, what's the right time? We know there's some issues, and maybe we can manage those for a couple more months, but there is a time where that, unfortunately, because of nutrition, because of medications, falling, whatever that is, okay, the time is now, and now what is our plan?
Right.
And so again, it's walking through, and there's lots of different things you can do, and we could have a whole hour conversation on that, but it's transitioning them. Maybe it's coming to eat at the facility that you feel is the right place, and you dine there once a week for a month, and your mom slowly meets people. Maybe it's coming for an activity, especially memory care, of learning to kind of be there and spend an hour or two and then going back home, and that slow transition of making sure that their place, one thing I always tell families is, I think in the families have great intentions of when they move into assisted living, I'm going to go make my mom really happy and buy all new stuff. Probably, unfortunately, the worst thing you can do, because you're moving them out of their home after 50 years,
right,
and they're moving into a place already that's concerning, and now they've, in their view, lost all their things.
Wow.
So I tell families, don't buy new beds and furniture, and yes, maybe it is 50 years old and it's time, but right now the best thing you can do for your mom is move that furniture, replace it in 6 months, but hang up those pictures and hang up all those things she knows that are her comfort,
right.
And then if you think down the road something needs to change, do it then. But
it's such words of wisdom. One of the things that I love about what we're able to do as Helping Seniors of Brevard is we're blessed to have so many people that have so much expertise, and I think that's one of the things I would say to you, viewer, as you're watching a TV show like what we're talking about today, is the very fact that there are people who, this may be the first time that you run across this situation, but I guarantee you, for like Greg Kennedy, he's talked to hundreds, if not thousands, of families and helped them work through those kinds of things. So why are we reticent to take advantage of the expertise that's so freely available to help us in these? And Greg, I wanted to say, if somebody is here in Brevard County and they want to learn more about Zon Beachside and just the kind of the cutting edge technology and the things that you do here that are so good for residents, how do they get in touch, or what would you say is the next step?
The great thing about a tour is it's free. It's really an education, doesn't cost you anything other than your time. And so, again, whether that's Zon or anywhere else, is it doesn't cost anything to come out and do a tour. And so you can always call us, 321-777-8840 is our number, and speak with one of our sales assistants, and they would love to sit down with you, talk with you, answer questions, tell you what to ask, because that's many times, I talk with families about, here's the things you should ask, educate them on, I'm not ready right now and I may not be ready for a year. That's great. We love those tours because we know that they're educating themselves, and if they ever need us, we're here, and now they're educated about their decision. But come and do a tour, come and eat, and then we'll walk them through, the different license levels. Very common thing with assisted livings is people just assume all assisted livings are the same.
Right.
And there's actually different licenses, and that allows people to do different things. And so all those things are good things to know now, and not, like I said, when you're in that crisis mode.
Yeah, we're definitely going to have to come back and do a show where we actually talk about that, because that is the challenge for us as a consumer. We're not in the space, so we don't really know even the right questions to ask. And this has been very helpful to kind of like move the conversation along. So Greg Kennedy with Zon Beachside, I really want to thank you for, well, first of all, you've been a great friend of the Helping Seniors organization, even since before the building was here, and you guys are always on the cutting edge of everything, and we appreciate all that you do for seniors in this area. But particularly, listen to Greg's advice about sitting down and having some of these conversations ahead of the curve, so that you are well prepared looking ahead rather than just trying to catch up. It feels terrible, like when you're behind the 8 ball and you're just trying to figure out and make all these decisions on the fly. Why not take the time, get the information now, file it away. You may not need it 6 months, a year, 2 years, 4 years, but at least you'll have already invested in yourself and your loved ones to be able to do that. So Greg, one more time, if somebody wants to get in touch with Zon Beachside and maybe say, hey, I heard you guys talking about it, I'd like to take a tour, just I'm not sure that we're ready yet, but we need to know something more.
And reach out to, again, call the facility at 321-777-8840 and just say, I just want to take a tour and would love to learn more about assisted living.
Yeah,
we would love to be that educator.
It's all the story about getting your ducks in a row, getting ahead of that aging curve. And so that's the time we have for today's Helping Seniors TV. I want to thank you on behalf of our president and founder, Joe Steckler, and our entire Helping Seniors of Brevard team. We're here to help empower and educate, inform, and connect you to resources that are going to make a difference as you make your own aging plan and get your ducks in a row. I'm Kerry Fink. We'll see you next time.
I'm Joe Steckler. Thank you for joining our program today. I'd like to remind you that our senior information line is available to you at 321-473-7770. There you can get help and direction that could be helpful for your specific situation or circumstances. The work of helping seniors is very important, but we can't do it alone. That is why our sponsors here in Brevard County are so important. I'd like to thank our many area sponsors, businesses and medical providers who support the mission of helping seniors that help us carry the cost of our media efforts. If you'd like to join us either as a business partner or simply donate as an individual, we would welcome your call at 321-473-7770. You are always welcome to visit our website at www.helpingseniorsofbrevard.org. Thanks so much for your help. It does make a difference.